We'll start in about 2 minutes. We're coming out of executive session. That'll give council enough time to use the restroom and kind of get adjusted. Joan, keep signing, Bonnie. I would like to remind everybody that if you'd like to speak at Public Invited to be Heard during the first round, you need to sign your name on this list. If you're not on the list, you'll still be able to be heard, but you will be pushed to the end, so to speak. So if somebody is out there that's wanting to talk the first round, make sure you go out there and get on the other sign-up sheet, please. And with that, let's go ahead and have a roll call.
Mayor Bagley?
Here.
Council members Christensen? Here. Finley? Here. Martin? Here. Peck? Rodriguez? Here. Mayor Bagley, we have a quorum.
Great. Let's have the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 28th?
I so move.
Good enough. Let's go ahead and vote. Yeah. It was moved by Councilmember Martin and seconded by Councilmember Peck. We missing anybody? All right, that passes unanimously. Valerie, are there any revisions, to the agenda? All right. Are there any submission of documents or motions to direct city staff in the future? All right. Seeing none, city manager, do you have a report?
Mayor, Council, I do have a quick report. I wanted to let you know, I want to recognize someone. So, John Gage, I think you're somewhere in the audience. So, I wanted to recognize John. We were just notified. We talked to you all about the methane reuse project for our solid waste vehicles and the grant we put into the DOLA earlier. We were just notified that we actually received $1 million grant from DOLA to actually carry that to move forward with that project, and John did the heavy lifting on it. So I wanted to recognize him when he was here and let you all know we got the grant.
Good job, John. See, that's what I mean when it's okay when people approve.
So now the heavy lifting really comes into play in building the project and getting the vehicles. But great news, we also have a $500,000 grant from another regional air quality council. So $1.5 million in grants for that project.
All right, thank you. Now, we have, you got to bear with me, I've got a cough. We will now hear a special report and presentation regarding mobility, or VIA's mobility services. Welcome, VIA.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's good to see you all again. It's been a while since I've spoken. My name is Rick Accountis. I am on the board of directors with VIA, and I want to start out by thanking you for your previous contributions to VIA and giving us the opportunity to step up tonight and speak to you about some facts about VIA and some of the great things that we're doing in your community right now. So to begin, let's go ahead and start by giving you a little bit of facts with regard to VIA. I'm going to try not to read to the slides, but I want you to know that, is it working? No. There we go. So VIA was founded in 1979. It's a private nonprofit organization. We basically provide on-demand, wheelchair-accessible, door-through-door, driver-assisted paratransit services. That's our mission service. In addition to that, we provide travel training, mobility options, and we provide information and referrals, basically. A couple of things with regard to that. We were formerly known as Special Transit, and around 2006, we changed our name to VIA. We operate in 5 counties and in about 30 communities, and we employ about 300 people. Something about VIA that a lot of people don't know about is our business model is basically a social enterprise model. And what that means is that we're generally defined as a business that produces revenue that is used to directly benefit our nonprofit mission and clients. So everything we make basically goes back into that paratransit mission. Some of the earned income contracts that we perform are the HOP, you might have heard of that in Boulder, also Access a Ride and Call and Ride. Our mission, we've already jumped up to mission. Our vision, I'll just skip through mission. Our mission is we promote independence and self-sufficiency for limited mobility and providing care and customer-focused transportation option. Basically, people who need a ride, and quite frankly, all of us are going to get to that point. We're all going to need a ride. We're going to have to give up our keys. So that's one of our big clientele. Vision, we're here. We envision a future where all people, regardless of demographics and limitations, have easy access to mobility options and transportation options that enhance their independence and quality of life. So VIA's core services are obviously transportation, but we also provide travel training, which is, as the name implies, we take people on, we teach them how to navigate bus routes, different travel opportunities to them. We also provide mobility options, so we might take a client and help them get from point A to point B without all the fluff that goes around it, such as bus schedules and things like that. And of course, we also provide information and referrals. Just briefly to touch, I'm here to give you the, go ahead. I'm here to give you the 30,000-foot view. This is Lindsay Morse. She's our communications manager. She's going to bring it closer down to what VIA is doing for Longmont and some of the service that we provide. As you can see, 50% of our revenue comes from government grants and donations. So it's a huge amount. Basically speaking, we are trying to set a goal to get 25% out of each community of the service value that we provide. To give you an example, in 2016, Lafayette, the services we provided were roughly about $250,000. They, in turn, gave us about $56,000. So they did pretty decent. We only... 14%, thank you. By contrast, Erie and Louisville, they gave almost 24% and 42% respectively. So there are communities that are giving us that 25%, but for the most part, we're challenged to get that. So, and then finally, with regard to our expenses, you can see it's primarily salaries and benefits. I want to point out, though, that it's a driver issue for us. We've raised our salaries for our drivers because it's a very competitive market to keep drivers in our business. So we've raised that. In addition, the cost of a ride in 2016 was roughly $33 per trip. Now, in 2017, by mid-year, that had climbed to almost $36 per trip. So you can see we're kind of operating at a loss. We're relying on a lot of donations and government grants. So with that, I just want to thank you. I know some of you, Councilman Christensen and Councilman Peck, you've been to VIA. I would actually like to invite all the other council folks to come and visit VIA at any time. We have a wonderful facility. We are also have been named one of Boulder's 3 resiliency hubs, which means if we ever have a catastrophic event like we did with the flood in 2013, VIA will still be in business, and we are considered a second responder to those emergencies. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Thanks, Rick. So touching a little more before I move on about Longmont specifically, we've already seen in 2016 a 4.27% increase in ridership, and Longmont is one of our fastest growing communities. I'm sure that surprises none of you. And overall, this year our services Our services in Longmont were valued at $1.1 million, and coming into 2018, you're scheduled to be funding about 14% of that. But again, you're one of, if not the most expensive community because of demand. So a little bit about our paratransit service. This is definitely general across the board for all of our communities. Longmont specifically, going down, looking at services, we provide obviously local services every day of the week for the most part. We have limited services on Saturdays and Sundays. We do a lot of community church type services on Sundays, that kind of thing. On town T2T, $6 stands for town to town. In Longmont, we do daily service down to Boulder, and we also do services on Tuesdays only to and from Lyons, and then there's also a loop that goes between Lafayette, Louisville, and Erie. And this is really our core founding service. It's the service that everybody's going to recognize, our vehicles, that kind of thing. Getting into the specifics, most of our trips, pretty much across the board, definitely in Longmont, are going to be medical trips. We've seen a big increase in ridership. The numbers on the right-hand side for 2016 are for the full year, and obviously year-to-date through October for the rest of the numbers. And you can see we're pretty much catching up to where we were last year, and we're probably going to exceed. I did see some numbers, not final numbers, through November, and I believe we were up to almost 300 riders, new riders registered, active riders. We, I think, increased by 25. And then trips provided to date, 34,199 trips in the city of Longmont, which is pretty exciting. And you're the second highest demand that we serve, and based on growth, you're likely going to outpace Boulder pretty soon. We don't know when that'll happen, but we're trying to build our ridership and also funding, obviously, to accommodate that. In Longmont, 80-plus folks make up about 22% of our riders, which is pretty high. But again, we serve people who are low mobility, so they may just be somebody who doesn't want to drive anymore, maybe somebody experiencing a temporary disability. It doesn't have to be something that's life-crippling. And we have a great story of a gal who ended up using VIA. She's in her 30s, and she got in an accident and broke her leg, and she used us to and from therapy in the city of Longmont, which was pretty exciting. So, like I said, most of our trips are for medical purposes. You'll see down in other trips those few little things that don't seem to fit in. True Pace was started in February of 2017. We provide about 600 trips a month. And that's going to be an adult day program. So people who want to remain in their homes but need extra services. And maybe it's something they go to daily. Maybe it's something they go to once or twice a week to see a specialist. And we provide all of the transportation for the folks who go there who don't have other means to get there. And we consider those medical trips as well. CareLink, this is increasing steadily as Homestead sort of moves back on the amount of folks that they're helping, so we're expecting an increase there as well, and that again is a medical trip. So travel training is one of my personal favorites. It's really neat because I like that we are going out into the community and really helping people remain self-sufficient. So we are going to go have one-on-one meetings with these folks, getting them comfortable with using whatever service they may need at the time. We've got some folks who might need to learn how to use the bus to go to work every day, or maybe they're going to some sort of after-school program and they have some sort of developmental disability and their parents aren't yet comfortable with them using a service by themselves. So we'll assess the situation, go with them, until they're comfortable doing it by themselves, and then we even follow them the first few times that they're going alone just to make sure they have it down and they're getting where they need to go. It's a really cool way to deter people from using our paratransit service if they maybe don't need it, but still have that independence that they wouldn't otherwise have. And last year, I don't have this year's numbers unfortunately, but 5 Longmont residents completed this. And overall, not specifically Longmont, they average about 27 trips a month, which is nearly every day, which is great. So as Rick mentioned, we also offer people individualized travel plans, information, and referrals. So an individualized travel plan is going to be somebody who doesn't know exactly how to use the public transportation services, but they don't need a one-on-one training of how to do it. So we get them all the information, what they need to know, and then they go out on their own and do it. Mobility options refers to those folks who maybe don't live in our area or don't have a need that we could help them with, but we want to get them to where they're going to be helped the most. So we provide them with information about other resources in the area and how they can access those resources. We also do a friends and family reimbursement program, and this is another way we sort of cut down on our denials. We will pay friends and family up to $100 a month to provide service for their friends and family, basically. So 50 cents a mile, they just submit a form at the end of the month, and we send them a check in the mail, and it helps people get where they need to go and eliminates that need on our part, which is great because then we're able to help others who don't have that resource available to them. So we started our volunteer driver program back in beginning of 2016, and it's really taken off this year. It's quite exciting. We started the year with 11 volunteers, and it has grown out of our control in the best way possible, and we have 25 active volunteers currently, and they are the most amazing group of people. I've had the fortune of meeting a lot of them. We have 10 Longmont residents, which is really exciting, and these folks are so willing to go above and beyond on the weekend or a holiday just to get folks to their friends and family if they don't have other means to get there, to get them to church, to the hair salon. We even had one fellow offer to take someone to the airport, which is not a normal request for us, but they're so willing to just go above and beyond and help out. And it's great to see how much they truly enjoy getting to work with these people when they're giving them the rides. It's a really amazing program. If anybody's interested, let me know. So when we started this volunteer driver program, one of the biggest things we were concerned about was making sure that these folks are fully trained. So they are trained, they get the same exact training that any of our paid drivers get, aside from the CDL piece, because they're using either a Via Prius or their own vehicle. So they don't need that extra step in training for a large vehicle, which is exciting because it saves us a week of training, but it's also really important to us that they get all the safety training and just general training that one would need in dealing with vulnerable populations. So all of them go through that with our training team at our Boulder location. We also implemented online ride scheduling, and that's grown a bit. Not all of our folks are willing to use that yet. We have a lot of people still calling in, but it's a really great option for those who do choose to use the internet and go on and schedule their rides. And they can actually schedule their rides a little bit more in advance, up to 11 days, whereas if you call in, it's up to 7 days. So we also started this notification system, which has saved us a lot of time and also helped with denials and cancellations. So our riders will get a phone call the night before. They can either cancel or accept the ride. If they don't answer, they still have the ride. So there's not a chance of losing out on that piece of it. But it's really helped on missed trips. So Rick touched on this a little bit, but to further go into just our commitment to sustainability and what that means for us and for the city of Longmont, we started a Longmont coordination project, I believe about 7 years ago. And the whole goal was to help with denials, specifically in our paratransit service, but across the board in our Access-a-Ride and call-and-ride services as well. So what we basically do is we just use those 3 services collaboratively and share rides. So it has allowed us to give about just under 1,500 additional trips without adding any extra vehicles or service hours. We've also had the opportunity to work on a new software to be able to do this, and we were the pilot project for that, which was really exciting for us to be able to be a part of that, since we use this technology all of the time, and it's going to be something that's going to help other folks who may have a paratransit service or might be collaborating with a ride-sharing service, and having that net of organizations being able to all choose from one pot will just help give more to more folks. So we are also named Boulder's first resiliency hub, which is really exciting for us. When we built our new building back in 2011, we were given the Green Building Star Award for the way the building was built and the efficiencies in the building. And we also have a solar panel array that we bought out last year, which was really exciting for us to be able to get that energy back and not have it just go right into the grid. And through a program with the City of Boulder and some worthy cause money that we received, we are able to purchase a generator, which is going to run on natural gas and then eventually renewables. And the solar will go into that, and hopefully we'll be able to get some new solar, which is really exciting. And that's one of the reasons that we were awarded the Resiliency Hub piece, since we'll be able to run completely off-grid. And then our fleet. So currently, we have hybrid electric vehicles, CNG, clean diesel, and obviously conventional gasoline. But we have ordered our first electric hot bus, and our goal is to eventually be fully electric and be able to charge those electric vehicles off-grid through our generator. It's a huge undertaking. It's going to be something like $14 million to complete that whole thing, so it's certainly not going to happen in the next 5 years, but it's something we're really striving for because we know that eventually that's going to be the norm. So that is the end, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I love VIA. I think it is a great service, and I can see in the future when we are looking at end-of-mile service or end-of-trip service, when we have State Highway 119 BRT completed and the Northwest Corridor train coming into our transit station, that people are going to need services from that station to wherever they need to go. So I think this is a great collaboration, and we should continue with it. Thank you.
And I will say that first and last mile is something we're very focused on. In fact, we're looking at a pilot project in Boulder to help folks in the Flatiron Business Park be able to get to and from RTD stations easier and also circulate during lunchtime to get to local businesses. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation and
Thank
your work there at
you.
VIA.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Countess, thank you.
Oh, this one's yours.
I believe there's also a special report and presentation by the Firehouse Arts Center.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Karen Roney with the Community Services Department, and I'm going to introduce this item. And just to give a little background and about the Firehouse Arts Center. So the city does own the building in which Firehouse Arts Center operates on the corner of 4th and Kaufman. We have leased that building to Firehouse Arts Center for the past 30 years. We have come to the end of our most recent lease agreement, which ended actually in November of 2017, and it now has converted to a month-to-month lease arrangement. And the Firehouse Arts Center executive director, members of the board, is they're here tonight to really talk about what they have been, what happens in that building, how the services that they offer contribute to our community and add value to the community. And I imagine what they are going to love to ask City Council would be the opportunity to continue to operate in that building for the next several years. And so really what we want to do is certainly Beryl is right behind me, ready to make her presentation. And at the close of that presentation, what staff would be looking for is direction from council about whether or not you would want for us to proceed to put together a lease agreement for another term with the Firehouse Arts Center, or if you have desire to consider other possible uses for that building or other direction you would like to give to staff. So I will step away from the podium and invite Beryl Durazo, Executive Director of Firehouse Arts Center, to make a presentation.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council members, and thank you for providing us the opportunity to present about the Firehouse Arts Center. And more importantly, we want to thank you for all of the years of use of the space. I also wanted to, my name is Beryl Durazo. I'm the Executive Director for the Firehouse Arts Center. In addition, I have Christy Felton, our Board President from the Firehouse. And we'll just get our presentation queued up, sorry. Today, we would like to provide the Council with an overview of the accomplishments of the Firehouse and our hopes for the future. The mission of the Firehouse Arts Center is to promote cultural awareness of the arts in the community by providing diverse educational programs, events, and curation of local, regional, and national art exhibits. In studying the Envision Longmont Plan, we have identified key areas that we connect with the Council and our community. One of the key findings was that the Firehouse supports the continued revitalization of downtown Longmont, both as a community and regional destination by providing access to contemporary art, cultural events, and activities in our region. We partner with the Gray Havens Literacy Group, Front Range Community College, St. Vrain Valley School District, and over 32 other key stakeholders in our community. Ultimately, with improved programming and additional partners, we have seen a 60% increase in attendance in the first 2 quarters of 2017 versus 2016. There has been an increase in attendance not only in the first 2 years of this quarter, but consistently over the past 7 years. More importantly, we have grown from 7,892 visitors in 2014 to over 10,795 visitors in 2016. And we are projected to reach over 11,854 individuals in 2017. The Firehouse is dedicated to providing access to arts and culture and learning opportunities for all members of our community. This can be seen in our diverse programming offered at the Firehouse as well as throughout the community. The Firehouse curates 12 exhibitions every single year, mixing solo and group shows. In keeping with our mission, our exhibitions are a diverse blend of traditional and contemporary styles that intersperse the work of local, regional, and national artists. As a contemporary art center, we have provided more than 100 plus artists every single year with the opportunity to showcase their work in our community. In addition, our exhibitions provide developing artists the opportunity and initial experience to create their show and audience. Gama, Jessica Forrestal, and Sean Falling are just a few of the successful artists that have gone on beyond Longmont as a result of their work at the Firehouse. One of my favorite things that we do, obviously, is our education programs. Art Attack, one of my favorite. It provides opportunities for underserved youth at Casa de la Esperanza with access to feedback, instruction, and experience among our exhibitions. Every week, Mario Jose Olvera works with our students from Casa de la Esperanza, and we just wanted to show you a brief video of those kids. I don't know what it's doing. Sorry about that.
I think the greatest thing is to see some of the older kids.
Sorry.
Just tell me about when they were young and how they were a part of the program.
My name is Mario Jose Olvera. I'm the art
Well, you
instructor
can
for
hear
the Art Attack program based out of the Firehouse Art Center.
Go, Rob.
Currently back and forth at Casa de la Esperanza and Firehouse teaching and introducing many types of styles of art, artists.
You've got two open. Close that window on top.
Flowers. I can also show you how to do flowers.
Awesome. Now, if you can just rewind it. Sorry. There we go. A little bit about what you think of Art Attack.
Well, I love the program. It's been around for so long, and I think the greatest thing is to see some of the older kids just tell me about when they were young and how they were a part of the program.
My name is Mario Jose Olvera. I'm the art instructor for the Art Attacks program based out of the Firehouse Art Center. Currently back and forth at Casa de la Esperanza and Firehouse teaching and introducing many types of styles of art, artists, and everything under the sun that has to do with art. Finger flowers. I can also show you how to do flowers too. Yes. This is also the same kind of technique as using, just by using those one strokes, I was able to create a body of it, right? Now I have the, kind of like the shape of it. I'm going to add some more detail to it, just so you guys can see where to go with it. I'm just going to piece that.
Well, as you can see, those kids are really enjoying themselves. I apologize. Vanessa Escargega was speaking earlier at the beginning of the video about her experience with the kids in the Art Attack program. This has been happening in partnership with Casa de la Esperanza for the past 7 years. So this is a very strong partnership that we have built with them, and hope to continue to provide. One thing I like to point out is the National Endowment for the Arts states that 55% of students who attend after-school art programs are more likely to attend post-secondary school. I think that's so crucial and something that we're able to provide to these youth that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. Our program has continued to expand not only in partnership with Casa de la Esperanza, but also with the Longmont Children, Youth, and Family Center. We now provide our teens at both Casa and the center with monthly activities. For the youth at Casa, we actually are there every single week or bring them to the Firehouse. In our commitment to provide access to arts and culture for all members of our community, Bradley Books and Ann Noble developed the Art of Possibilities program about 2 years ago. This program is specifically designed for individuals with disability to experience exhibition-based art activities. This transformational program not only affects the students, but everyone that is involved with it. Many of you may have heard Bradley Book's story, and he recently had, we can try to play the video, but I can tell you the story. Bradley Books had a show about 2 years ago which created the Art of Possibilities program. When he first came to the firehouse, he was confined to a wheelchair. And with the help of soft voices and other partners in the community, he was able to do art therapy and is now walking without even a cane. Really phenomenal work all through his experience, not only with the firehouse, but our other partners in the community. We are excited also to announce a new partnership with the Longmont Recreation Department's SCOPE program, as well as the local Alzheimer's Association. Individuals with disabilities goes so much further beyond our work with Imagine, and we're very excited to partner with them on this. It's really a life-changing experience when they get to experience the exhibition, as well as our art therapists and mentors that are at the program. Did you know that the Firehouse has weekly opportunities to explore all of our exhibitions and all forms of art? As a community center, we provide the following, and I'm going to give the floor to Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm the board president. Thanks for having us. First Friday, we always have independent film, which we have a really unique space that we're able to show film really, really well. And we've even had film festivals that we've helped sponsor. But we always have a unique independent film every first Friday. Second Friday, we do our art opening, and it's a chance for the community to get to know the artists are generally at the second Friday opening. And it's part of the whole Longmont Lower Downtown art community. Everybody has their openings, and it creates sort of a fun art atmosphere. The last Friday of every month, we have poetry night. It's an open mic night. And on the third Friday of every month, we have a writer's workshop. These two programs work together. They create a sense of community amongst creative writers, and a lot of the people who come to these particular events are also artists in other forms. And we've had photographers and educators and painters and collagists teach our different workshops. And it's very near and dear to my heart. I kind of run the poetry program. But one of the things that a friend of mine was recently saying to me was, I was born here. I'm a native, and the kind of programs that we run on our Friday nights, she was like, why didn't we have this stuff when we were growing up? And so the fact that we're able to provide it now is very exciting for someone who's lived here my entire life. So back to Beryl.
In addition to our monthly events, before we get to this slide, it's okay. We provide consistent community cultural events, not only within the firehouse, but outside. This year we did the Chalk Art Street Fair. It brought over 5,200 unique individuals to our community to experience chalk art. In addition to our annual Katrina Ball and Gigantes Fiesta, to celebrate Dia de los Muertos in our community. We were so grateful that the Multicultural Council Fund for the City of Longmont helped support that this year, as well as the Dickens Opera House. And of course, in addition to all of our many education programs, we also provide additional opportunities for youth at our Saturday art experience classes. These are held every single Saturday from 12 to 2. And we also provide scholarships for those who might not be able to afford it. We identify those individuals through partners such as the In-Between and other human service organizations in the area. But of course, more importantly, the Firehouse Art Center helps to preserve Longmont's historic and cultural resources. were a cornerstone for the Longmont Creative District and have created a unique reuse of historic space, which supports creativity for all. Recently, I've been contacted by a creative community in Maryland who would like to know more about the model of how we've built the firehouse and how it has become what it is today. So it's very exciting to see all of the work that the City Council has done to make this happen now being modeled on a national scale. In addition to our programs, we also provide a space for connecting with local creatives in our community. We have a 3-month artist in residence program where individuals can interact and learn from a working artist. Community space in our Studio C upstairs, where artists, artist members, individuals in the community can come and use that space for free to create what they need to. Studio artist residents, including Dwayne Wolf, Martha Williams, and Rick Stoner, have all been a key part of the downtown creative community for over a decade. And if you're not familiar with them, definitely come to the Firehouse and see their studios. We are so fortunate to live in such a supportive community. The Firehouse aims to make Longmont a desirable place to work, live, play, learn, and grow. None of this would be possible without the generous support of our patrons, volunteers, board members, and stakeholders who make this work possible. As you can see through the generous honors we have received over the years, we will continue to provide a cutting-edge and unique historic art center for our community. We can't thank our board, staff, volunteers, and our many benefactors enough, as the Firehouse strives to be a community art center for all. In conclusion, the Firehouse Art Center Board of Directors and staff would like to request the renewal of our lease for up to 10 years or more. The lease would provide our board, staff, funders, and other supporters in the community the opportunity to plan for the long-term future of the Firehouse. In addition, with our strong financial stability, we plan to invest in crucial infrastructure improvements for the continued and expanded access to our facilities and programs. We would like to thank you all for the opportunity to make this presentation. Currently, as we said previously, we have the board, staff, volunteers, and many supporters of the Firehouse here to show their support for our lease renewal. Wave, everyone. Awesome. But now I'd like to give the floor to the mayor and the city council for Q&A session, obviously. And thank you again for this time.
Thank you for showing up and giving the presentation. I love what they do. I encouraged my daughter to get involved. She was actually one of your student board members a while back. And I think it just adds a lot to the community. I personally think it's a great idea to extend the lease for another 10 years. Do I have any other thoughts from my fellow council members? Councilmember Rodriguez?
There it is. Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Some of you might know I'm on the Board of Directors for Arts Longmont, who has partnered with the Firehouse on various events and such throughout the years, and I will also attest to the great work that they're doing over there with not just a lot of times very thought-provoking exhibitions, but as well as the community outreach and all those programs as well that mean so much. And I'm a big proponent of arts education, and what they're doing at Casa de la Esperanza is amazing. So great stuff, and I'll be in support. Thank you.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Ditto. I think it's great, and it's really interesting when you have open houses to actually go upstairs to the artist studios with the artist and look at what they're doing and talk to them. I just love that. So yes, I agree we should extend that lease.
Just out of curiosity, there's not a motion, but is there anyone who would be not in favor of granting the lease? Then can I have a motion, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen?
I move that we renew the lease for the Firehouse Art Center. Do we have to decide on a time?
Staff.
Okay, just direct staff then to draw up a renewal of the lease. Thank you.
Do I have a second? Let's go ahead and vote.
Oh, okay.
That passes unanimously. Congratulations and thanks again.
So Mayor Bagley, Hi, me again, Karen. Right now the lease is established as a 5-year lease with another opportunity to extend for another 5 years, so it would be a 10-year total. So if that's the direction we will, we do want to look at the lease agreement to just see if there's any other modifications we need to make, but we'll bring back something in the next few weeks with for council action.
Look forward to it.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to first call, public invited to be heard. Mr. Coleman Pearson. I didn't see you. Oh, there he is. Come on down, Coleman.
I'm Coleman Pearson. You know where I'm from. I was in pretty good mood when I got here. And then I heard that VIA presentation. That's information I've never received at the suite since I've been there. I rode a bicycle out to get a neurology exam. They stuck needles in my leg and gave me electroshocks to see how bad my neuropathy is. I could benefit from that VIA service. I have a document here signed by Alma Collins and Roma Valle, and it's been amended to say they cannot discuss proof of guilt. Well, what the heck are they talking about, proof of guilt? I didn't sign the document. Have they shown you this over there, Susan Spalding? Why won't they be up front with you guys? You know, I had a woman threaten me as I was leaving the building tonight. Last name is Loving. I never met her before in my life. She says, you need to be respectful. Well, turns out her boyfriend is Mike Keeley. He moved out from his apartment and moved directly into hers. It's terror living there. I got to go down the gauntlet no matter where I go. And people can make up stuff just like I'm going to court tomorrow. And in my mind, I'm in prison. You know, there is no good faith of Longmont Housing Authority. You know, lost hope altogether. I stood eye to eye with Mike Reeves. He said he would never fire Roma and Alma. They're both gone now. People threatening me every day. That church is still up my behind over there. Guy says I've given him a bad reputation. Well, why is he calling the police at me? He's so Christian-like. At my place where I live. You know, it don't make no sense to me, man. You know, I'm just an ignorant boy from Alabama. You know, I knew Roy Moore growing up. I could have told you what he was like. How's that grab you?
All right. Mr. Bruce Weiner. All right. Brett Landis. Is it you, Bruce? Yes. All right, Bruce, come on back. Thank you. Mr. Landis, you warm up. You're in the bullpen.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council. My name is Bruce Weiner. I'm the Executive Director of Bridge to Justice. Bridge to Justice is a 501c3 nonprofit law firm based in Boulder that provides reduced-rate legal services to low and moderate-income individuals in family law, landlord-tenant, and other civil legal matters. Since October 2016, we have staffed an office 1 day a week at the new Hour Center facility on Collier Street. Whereas Boulder County Legal Services and other legal aid providers assist the indigent, we work with individuals who are slightly over income for legal aid but cannot otherwise afford a market rate attorney. We also assist individuals who do not qualify for legal aid because of a conflict of interest or because legal aid does not assist in certain types of cases. Our work in post-decree family law cases is particularly significant as legal aid does not assist in these cases, which generally involve a modification or enforcement of parenting time, decision-making, child support, or alimony, essentially any issue that comes after a court enters a divorce decree or child custody order. These cases tend to be high conflict and protracted, and therefore consume a disproportionate amount of judicial resources. The need for affordable civil legal services in Longmont and Boulder County is significant. In 2016, 63% of the 1,460 domestic relations cases filed in Boulder County had no attorney on the case, and 71% of the nearly 3,000 parties involved in these cases did not have representation. The percentage of self-represented tenants and debtors in evictions and consumer debt cases is even higher. The primary reason why there are so many people representing themselves in these cases is because there is no constitutional right to a lawyer in civil cases as there is in criminal matters. This poses enormous problems both for litigants who go to court representing themselves and for the court system generally. It is well established that the presence of a lawyer in a divorce, child custody, housing, and other kinds of civil legal disputes significantly increases the likelihood of a favorable result for the litigant, as well as expedites the resolution of the case, since self-represented parties are generally unfamiliar with the law and court procedure. Although Bridge to Justice is a relatively new organization established in 2013, we assist over 100 Longmont residents each year, representing over a third of our client base. We have found that many Longmont clients can afford our services, even if we can only help with a part of the case. Because our services impact our clients' ability to stay in their home, to spend time with their children, and to support their families, we address many of the community needs identified by the city as worthy of human services funding.
All right, I hate to cut you off, but
sure.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Landis. Or, sorry, Ms. Landis. Sorry, Ms. Landis.
That's all right. I confuse everyone with my name. Thank you very much, Mayor Bagley. My name is Brett Landis. I am managing attorney. My name is Brett Landis. I am managing attorney of Boulder County Legal Services, which Mr. Miner was good enough to refer to in his talk just a second ago. And I am here to speak about the reduction in funding for legal services by the city of Longmont. Our organization has been very lucky. We are very grateful that we have been funded by the city for the past 33 years. However, this year we are looking at a significant reduction at the levels to which we've been funded previously. 40% of all of our clients in Boulder County Legal Services come from the city of Longmont. They are City of Longmont residents that we are assisting with our services. Just an overview in case someone is unaware of what we do. We are the Colorado Legal Services Office for Boulder County. So we serve all of Boulder County from Netherland to Longmont to Louisville and provide civil legal representation and advice for low-income residents. And like I said, 40% of our cases come from Longmont. One of the things that we have addressed sorry, I apologize. So one of my concerns is that we are categorized in the safety and justice category for the Human Services Grant. However, what we do is much more expansive than that. We provide a significant amount of assistance in housing cases, which really is homelessness prevention. 25% of the Longmont cases we had were housing cases, and we can just as easily fit into that housing category. Additionally, we handle a significant number of public benefits cases, which range from health care to food stamps to TANF to Social Security, all of which could fall into health and well-being, food and nutrition, self-sufficiency, and reliance. Really, our services run the gamut, and to classify us as just one category is really not quite fair. Finally, I do want to talk about some of the limitations of our services. I am the sole attorney on staff with BCLS. We manage to serve as many clients as we do, in part because of the great generosity of the attorneys of the Boulder Bar, but also a good part in due to contract attorneys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Ms. Landis.
Thank you.
Jacob Harmon.
Mayor Bagley, council members, thank you. I will be brief. My name is Jacob Harmon. I'm the Executive Director of Voices for Children CASA of Boulder County. I'm also here today to talk about the Human Services funding and recommend that you, we're very pleased. We've been serving the children in Boulder County who are victims of child abuse and neglect since 1985. Last year, there were more than 3,000 substantiated reports of child abuse here in Boulder County. Of those, more than 300 kids were removed from their home. These are the children that we serve with professional, volunteer, court-appointed special advocates. And to my knowledge, I'm relatively new to this area and to this organization, but to my knowledge, this is the first time that we've been recommended by the Advisory Council to receive funding through the City of Longmont. So I wanted to thank all of your volunteers who went through that, I know, lengthy and difficult process. There are so many great organizations on that list doing so much great work that we are honored to be among them for the first time this year. Thank you for your consideration. We will serve 200 children this year, 150 of them from Longmont. We have 161 active volunteers right now. Only about 30 from Longmont. So I can promise you that the money that we hopefully will receive from the City of Longmont will be used to recruit volunteers from Longmont to better serve their community. Again, I thank you for your consideration, and I thank all of our community partners who are on that list doing such wonderful work and making this such a fantastic place to live. So thank you for your time.
James Kenworthy.
James Kenworthy, 107 Caribou Place. Good to see you all again. April 17th, 2017. A leaking underground pipeline causes an explosion at a house in Firestone. 2 men killed. Anadarko Petroleum owns the pipeline. Governor Hickenlooper says Colorado officials would do anything possible to make sure such a disaster never happens again. May 25th, a tank explodes near Meade. 1 worker killed, 61 years old. 2 injured. June 19th, fire, Great Western Operating Company well pad, a leaking valve, 1 person injured. July 30th, lightning strike and fire in Cheyenne County, Syndication Oil and Gas Corporation. September 11th, fire in Weld County, Great Western Operating Company. September 12th, the next day, lightning strike, Berry Petroleum. The blast blew a tank, 300-barrel capacity tank, 150 yards. No injuries reported. September 30th, fire at a Great Western facility near Brighton. October 12th, fire at a Great Western facility near Brighton. Same site. November 7th, fire at SRC Energy in Weld County. No injuries reported. The state has not taken any enforcement action in the April 17th Firestone deaths, saying there is no rule and none is proposed covering oil and gas industry accidents that lead to facilities. Colorado oil and gas industry regulators have responded to the fire disaster by proposing modifications of existing rules, but none of the changes deal with industrial accidents that result in deaths. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission lacks the authority to punish companies for fatal explosions, according to agency spokesman Todd Hartman. TODD, not Tom. The state can't do anything about these accidents. Weld County won't do anything about these accidents. Neither bureaucratic group is interested in taking any action. I hope Boulder County can do better. Boulder County needs to, and this city, needs to pass some laws putting the industry on notice that they'll be watched closely. I don't know what you did. Oh, time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenworthy.
You bet.
Lynette McCain, or McLean. Come on down, Ms. McLean.
Hi, my name is Lynette McLean, and I am representing the Longmont Public Forum. I live at 969 Reynolds Farm Lane. The Longmont Public Forum was just founded about 6 months ago, and our purpose is to bring informational presentations to Longmont. And we'd just like to invite the City Council and the City Council staff, members and staff, to our next presentation in January. Because Americans spend over twice as much per capita on health care as the average developed country, we decided to focus our next presentation on health care. So January 23rd, from 6:30 to 9 at the Longmont Library, we're going to be showing part 1 of our 2-part focus on health care. The movie is going to be Big Pharma Market Failure, and it'll explore the problem of extreme drug prices in the United States, how drug cost impacts the public, businesses, and overall U.S. economy. This documentary makes an effective business case for realizable change. It digs deep to answer key questions. How much do pharma companies really spend on research and development of truly innovative drugs? Do free market principles impact drug prices and help control costs? Do the normal rules of business apply to big pharma industry? How do TV ads impact consumers? It's a compelling drama, and it reveals the truth of pharma cost and what we can do about it. After the movie, we're going to have a panel discussion with 2 local experts. State Senator Jeannie Nicholson, registered nurse and vice chair of the board of directors of the Colorado Federation for Universal Health Care, and Virginia Gebhardt, retired pharmacist and a volunteer activist with the Colorado Foundation for Universal Health Care. Will both give us a little discussion. Virginia believes that being active in the universal health care movement is the best way to push back against these perverse incentives and attempt to put care back into health care. So for part 2, just briefly, in March of 2018, we're going to do a movie and a panel discussion on the movie Fix It, Healthcare at the Tipping Point. And the movie and panel will discuss how our healthcare system is damaging our economy, suffocating our businesses, discouraging physicians, and negatively impacting the nation's health while remaining unaffordable for a third of our citizens. So we hope you'll be able to make it. The Big Pharma Market Failure movie and the panel discussion on January 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at the Longmont Library. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. McLean. John Coe? Okay. And Strutter Benston?
Greetings, folks. Mayor Bagley, council, people. The whole world, Strider Benston, 951 17th. The whole world is watching Alabama tonight to see what kind of a country we live in. I gave blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, 52 years ago for the right to vote. Our Attorney General, Beauregard Sessions III, KKK, has spent his entire life to abrogate and suppress the right to vote. Today, his Senate seat is up and challenged by a child abuser who was twice thrown out of the Supreme Court for refusing to abide by the U.S. Constitution. Last week, he was asked, when was America great? He said, during slavery, America was great. His wife said yesterday, we're not prejudiced. We have a lawyer who is a Jew. And she thought that was a compliment. John Galen Locke, who was the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan in Colorado, his lawyer was Jewish. These people are supported by a person who calls himself the president. He's a serial sexual predator. He said the Nazis are fine fellows when they march down the streets of Charlottesville carrying torches and threatening a church. Saturday, he committed blasphemy because he mentioned the name of Rosa Parks and Medgar Evers. I knew Rosa Parks. Medgar Evers, they killed him before I got to Mississippi. They called Doug Jones weak on crime. Why? Because he prosecuted the Ku Klux Klan for the murder of the 4 little girls in the church in Birmingham. In Jackson, Mississippi in 1963, there lived a man who was brave. He fought for freedom all of his life, but they laid Medgar Evers in his grave. Now Medgar has some company in his heavenly home. Those little children of Birmingham, like Jesus, they died for you and for me. They died for you to be free.
Thank you, Mr. Benston.
Thank you.
All right, with that will conclude our first public invited to be heard, and let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break and get on to the consent agenda. All right, let's go ahead and get started again. All right. We missing. Where's Joan? Is Joan here? Oh, okay. All right, Valerie, can we go ahead and move on to the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor Bagley. The first item on consent is 8A, Ordinance 2018-01, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Bram Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H16 to General Hangars Corporation. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for January 9th. Item 8B is Resolution 2017-117, approving the amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the City and the State of Colorado for a marijuana impact grant. Item 8C is Resolution 2017-118, approving the amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Boulder County for immediate resolution and short-term navigation services for Longmont adults experiencing homelessness. Item 8D is Resolution 2017-119, regulating parking permits pursuant to Chapter 11.36 of the Longmont Municipal Code. Item 8E is Resolution 2017-120, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and the Regional Transportation District for fare reimbursement for the Longmont 300 series routes and access a ride. Item 8F is Resolution 2017-121, approving the McIntosh Reservoir Recreation Lease between the City and the Lake McIntosh Reservoir Company. Item 8G is approve 3 capital improvement amendments, and item 8H is accept 15 capital improvement program amendments. And staff does not need to pull any items from consent.
All right. Do we have Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I move the consent agenda.
All right. If there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously. Let's move on to ordinances on second reading. The first one, Ordinance 2017-75, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities to the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st. Are there any questions from council for staff? Seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Anyone want to say or ask anything? Seeing none, let's close the public hearing. Can I have a motion? Councilmember Finley. The mic wasn't on, but Councilmember Finley just moved passage of Ordinance 2017-75. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Peck. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Let's move on to second reading of Ordinance 2017-76, a bill for an ordinance extending the approval period for the Peakview Estates annexation, generally located at 2725 9th Avenue in Longmont. Are there any questions from council for staff? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open the public hearing on this ordinance. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak? Seeing none, let's close the public hearing. Can I have a motion? Let's go ahead and call on Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I move that we pass Ordinance 2017-76.
Second.
It receiving a second from Councilmember Rodriguez. No further discussion. Let's go ahead and vote. And it passes unanimously. Let's go ahead and do second reading for Ordinance 2017-77, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapters 15.04 and 15.10 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding residential child care facilities. To begin with, it sounds like we have a presentation from staff. Or are you here to answer questions?
Whatever the council prefers. I have some remarks I'd like to present.
No, go ahead then.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Brian Schumacher with Planning Development Services. I know council's received correspondence from Mr. Singer regarding this particular item, expressing concerns regarding the proposed amendments. including the potential impacts of facilities such as Mr. Huey is considering on nearby residential neighborhoods and park facilities. Just wanted to address some of the items that were presented in the information that Mr. Singer provided, and also just to give some background regarding this amendment and the discussions that staff has had regarding this particular item. Also wanted to mention that staff and Mr. Huey both heard from a nearby property owner who also expressed some concerns about potential impacts of the facility. Mr. Huey did contact that particular property owner and explained what they are considering, assuming this amendment moves forward. And I know they had some discussions about that as well. So just in terms of background, this discussion on this topic, as mentioned previously, started this summer. It was actually in late June when staff was contacted by the broker for Mr. Huey, and they were wanting to discuss potential residential treatment therapy facility for youth in Longmont. And in mid-July, staff met with Mr. Huey and several of his representatives to discuss whether or not such a facility might fit under our current lineup of uses and also definitions that we have in our land development code. So between August and early October, staff spent some time reviewing the current state statutes regarding this particular item, related use categories and definitions in the land development code, and discussing whether what was being considered could fit under our current land development code. I just wanted to be clear, because there was a question brought up regarding the Colorado Sunshine Act, that no appointed board members or elected officials were part of staff meetings or discussions regarding this item during that time period. So when we looked at the land development code, as part of those discussions that staff had, we looked at several different definitions that we currently have in place. I'm not going to read through the definitions, but I just wanted to highlight those uses that we did look at. We looked at daycare center, skilled nursing and rehabilitation facility, residential rehabilitation or treatment facility, halfway house, family or group care home, and group care institution. Based upon the discussions that staff had, we came to the conclusion that our development code does not have a definition or use category that accurately fits this type of child care facility as licensed by the state. So I just wanted to note that this type of facility, if you're familiar with the Shiloh House out on the east side of town, just near Sandstone Ranch Park on Highway 119, it's a similar type of facility. That facility was originally approved as alternative homes for youth, and subsequently Shiloh House was approved in a partnership with Weld County as a state licensed residential child care facility prior to the property being annexed and zoned in the city under the BLI zoning. The Shiloh House provides residential and therapeutic services for 22 at-risk youth between the ages of 11 and 17 at that location. And the former alternative homes for youth and the current Shiloh House, they have been considered a non-conforming use in the BLI district since it was annexed into the city in 2005, because we really don't have a accurate classification for that type of facility. And we've had some discussions about, we're not aware of any significant or substantial concerns or violations with respect to that particular facility since it's been in operation on the east side of town. As mentioned when this came before the council in last month in mid-November, staff is in the process, and you're aware we've had some discussions about our code update process, that we're looking at a variety of use categories and definitions with respect to our zoning districts and our new lineup of zoning with our overall code update. and that's part of that is an implementation of the Envision Longmont plan that was adopted last year. And staff has discussed the need to update the group living and child care definitions and use categories in the code, since many of those are outdated and are not consistent with the state statutes and definitions. And so we plan to make accommodations for uses such as this as part of that code update process. Again, in mid-November, November 14th, we had a discussion with council whether to consider amending the code at this time or to wait for the code update process. I think it's accurate to state that the timing of this amendment is related to Kokua's desire to locate a facility in Longmont. If staff had not been approached by Mr. Huey and his representatives earlier this summer, I think that this particular code change would have occurred, obviously, with the larger code update process that's currently underway, rather than initiating a discussion with council last month. I also just wanted to, since there are several new council members, just mention that most amendments to the Land Development Code are initiated by the city, but it's not unusual to have an amendment requested by a private property owner or a organization other than the city. I think over the past 12 years, we've had about 12 instances where there's been code amendments requested by private property owners or other entities other than the city. So on November 28th, the ordinance was introduced to council, and at that time there was some discussion. I know council had received some preliminary input and had some discussions with some of the residents or neighbors in the community that expressed concerns about this potential amendment. And as a result of that discussion, I know council recommended that the ordinance be revised to have the residential child care facility use be considered as a conditional use as opposed to a permitted use in the BLI zoning district. And I also understand that there may be some questions regarding or about the original proposal to have this as a permitted use rather than a conditional use in the BLI zoning district. So I just wanted to provide a little more background on that. So the primary difference between a conditional use and a permitted use is mostly related to the process. For a conditional use, at least one, although multiple neighborhood meetings can be required prior to submitting an application. And a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission is also required. The Planning and Development Services Director may also require additional neighborhood meetings pre or post application, depending upon the potential for adverse impacts. The Planning and Zoning Commission is the decision-making body, although the Commission's decision can be appealed to City Council. For permitted use, one or more neighborhood meetings can also be required. It can also be waived by the Planning and Development Service Director if determined that the proposed development would not have adverse impacts on neighboring properties. Also for permitted use, the Director can be the decision-making body, or the Director can refer the application to the Planning and Zoning Commission based on the proposed development's potential impacts to the surrounding properties and neighborhoods. Again, in that scenario, if it's referred, the application, the Planning and Zoning Commission would be the decision-making body, and their decision could be appealed to City Council. The submittal requirements, review criteria standards, and ability of the decision-making body to impose conditions of approval are the same or very similar for both a conditional and a permitted use. Staff also has the ability to modify the notice area requirements to account for the potential impacts a proposed use may have. I know there have been several articles in the paper recently regarding Kokua's proposal. So when drafting the original version of the ordinance, before there was substantial public input regarding the amendments, or before there was the articles in the newspaper regarding what was being considered, staff thought that there were opportunities where If there were concerns brought up as part of the proposal, staff could still require a neighborhood meeting, could still refer it up to the Planning and Zoning Commission, even if it were a permitted use under that review process. As I mentioned, a permitted use is also subject to all applicable requirements and standards of the Land Development Code. The applicant is responsible for demonstrating that the application complies with the review standards for development applications. So under any scenario where there's conditional use or permitted use, no major, minor administrative development application shall be approved unless it meets the review criteria. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So looking at some of the existing other types of care facilities that are currently allowed in the BLI zoning district, we have daycare center, which I mentioned before. It's a limited use. So under a limited use, it's typically similar to a permitted use, but there's the ability to impose conditions on a particular use under that scenario. It's a little bit different than a conditional use. Conditional use is that process that automatically has to go through that public hearing process to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Medical offices and clinics, it's a limited use under facilities under 15,000 square feet and a conditional use for facilities over 15,000 square feet. And then skilled nursing and residential rehab facilities, it's a conditional use. Based on, and that was a couple of years ago when that amendment went through the review process. And that was an amendment that was requested by a property owner. And that was based on a recommendation. So the recommendation to have that as a conditional use at that time was based on a recommendation from the Longmont Economic Council over concern about potential loss of land for primary employment uses. So regarding this particular amendment, staff did contact the Longmont Economic Development Partners staff, just because it affects potentially business light industrial property and land available for employment uses, and discussed this proposed amendment with the LEDP staff, and they did not express any concerns with the amendment as proposed. So, based on the feedback that's been provided by the public, discussions that we've had to date with council, and also Planning and Zoning Commission on the 29th regarding the proposed amendment, we feel that having the use proposed as a conditional use is totally appropriate. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a hearing on November 29th on the proposed amendments. There's some background information in your packet. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes were included as a supplement to your communication and packet. And the Commission discussed this at length and voted 4-2 to recommend approval of the amendment. One of the dissenting commissioners felt that perhaps at this time we should consider additional zoning districts to be considered for this type of use as well, namely potentially the commercial district as well as the central business district. The other dissenting commissioner suggested that the definition for residential child care facilities specifically exclude residential rehabilitation or treatment facilities or halfway houses. That commissioner was concerned about individuals placed by the courts or law enforcement at a residential child care facility. So I just want to be clear that the proposed amendment before you this evening does not approve a specific use at a specific location. No application has been submitted for a specific location. This amendment would allow residential child care facilities such as Kokua Academy, if they so chose to submit, to be considered as part of a conditional use review under the Land Development Code. As I mentioned before, a neighborhood meeting would be required. Excuse me. Neighborhood meeting would be required. And then also a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission to address whether the use is appropriate at the proposed location and compatible with surrounding uses. If the conditional use were approved for a specific location, the decision-making body can impose conditions to ensure compatibility and mitigation of potential impacts on surrounding uses and properties. That could be related to the size of the facility, or it could be related to operational standards. The decision-making body may also impose time limits on conditional uses and require regularly scheduled reviews of approved conditional uses. So if Plan and Zoning Commission reviewed a conditional use, they could say, hey, we want you to check back in 6 months or a year to see if you're maintaining whatever conditions of approval were put in place, assuming the commission approved that particular use at that particular location. Again, the commission's decision can be appealed to City Council. Getting close to wrapping up here. Appreciate your indulgence. So Mr. Singer notes in his letter that the Kukua facility should be subject to a special use review. I know some communities use a special use review similar to the conditional use review process that the city has in place. Our land development code does not have a special use review process, nor is there an option for a use variance. As noted in Mr. Singer's letter and attachment, other or additional zoning districts should be considered for this type of use that may be more appropriate than the BLI district. Suggestions include the medical overlay district, the commercial zoning district, as well as the central business district. Several of the planning and zoning commissioners also mentioned this as well, as noted in the minutes. With the code update, most of the mixed-use districts that are being considered for this type of use and including the medical overlay district, commercial, and the central business districts, those will be mapped into mixed-use districts where this type of use will be considered as part of this code update process. So Mr. Huey, who was at your last meeting on November 28th and provided the council with an overview of what they were considering. I know he's not available this evening. I believe he's down in Guatemala, although there are representatives available this evening if council has questions for them. This is a legislative action, and council has the discretion to decide if this amendment is appropriate and if it should move forward or not, now or in the future. Council can pass the ordinance as currently proposed or with revisions to address additional concerns. Or council can take no action or defer action on the ordinance and provide direction as needed. That concludes my remarks. I'm happy to respond now or later on with some questions that the council may have.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. And Mr. Schumacher, thank you for this clarification. I would like to ask, given that there is the remapping of the zoning and coming up very shortly now, why didn't you just roll this particular new definition into the overall remapping rather than proposing it as a separate modification to the existing zoning?
I will say that, again, as I mentioned before, this is related to our discussions that we had with Mr. Huey and his representatives about their interest in moving forward sooner rather than later. And so that's why we brought the request to council in mid-November to see if council was interested in considering an amendment under our current zoning as opposed to waiting for the overall code update.
Thank you, I understand. And if this current amendment were voted down, could I assume that the new definition would be introduced again as part of the new zoning?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Brian, to get a state license for this type of facility, is it the applicant that is getting the license, or is it the building, the structure that's getting licensed?
The applicant would apply for a license at that particular location.
So he needs the location in order to apply for a state license.
Right, the state would need to come and inspect the facilities to make sure they're in compliance with state rules and regulations regarding a residential child care facility.
So I'm assuming that that is why he's pushing this, because he might have his eye on a facility. And just as a point of interest, what's his doctorate in? Do you know?
I do not know.
Just kind of curious. Okay. I have to think about this for a minute. Thank you.
I would say to tap onto what Brian said, even with this, in your question, even with this action, still doesn't give him the ability. He would still have to go, an applicant would still have to go through the conditional use and get approval via the Planning and Zoning Commission. If it was denied, appealed by the council, or if it was approved and appealed, we'll wait that decision before the location could be considered as, before they're able to put that in any application to the state.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. This question is for Brian. You spoke briefly about how medical overlay district, commercial, central business district, and BLI are all slated to be converted to various mixed-use districts. So even if, say, this were particularly delayed from being an amendment to BLI, isn't it very likely that that mixed-use district, after the conversion happens, will still allow this usage regardless, as a condition usage per se?
Yes, I believe so. There are some areas of the business light industrial district that are being mapped to primary employment, different than a mixed-use classification. That's based upon discussions that we had with the Longmont Economic Development Partners and their interest in obviously preserving areas for primary employment companies. So at least at this point, we're not considering having that type of residential child care facility under a primary employment zoning classification. But for those areas where the BLI is mapped to, say, for example, a mixed-use employment, yes, that would be accurate.
So in essence, it could just generally be stalling something that's inevitable in concept.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I've got one question, and that is, so essentially if I wanted to put a La Petite or a Montessori school into a BLI, that's what this is. It just makes it conditional. It makes it conditional upon the city giving permission. You say it applies to all residential child care facilities, or just only?
Any residential child care facility as defined and licensed by the state.
Okay, all right. So just, they got to live there.
Right.
Okay. Do we have a motion, Councilmember Peck? Oh yeah, that's true. We do. All right. I do know that there are Mr. Singer, I believe, signed up. Let's go ahead and move on to the public hearing on this ordinance. We've got one person signed up, Rob Singer.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So a couple things here. Thank you for your response, by the way. Councilmember Martin, I do appreciate getting that back. I do disagree with some of the points in there, as I pointed out in some of the discussions, but I do appreciate the response. The real estate agent was one of the proponents for the applicant during the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. We know where this is. Everybody knows where this is. So to say there's not a site in mind is disingenuous right off of the bat. You know, and I'd like it to be clear, I am not opposed to these types of facilities. I mean, and I know a lot of my neighbors are not opposed to these type of facilities. People are very, what we're opposed to is the procedure with which this is being done, and specifically where it's being put and the way this is being hidden from everybody. People want to talk about this. I mean, you've heard from a lot of different people about this, and they're interested in talking. And this has gone through with nobody even knowing about it. And we've gotten this far down this process without the public comment. I mean, the fact that I was able to get some people to at least pay attention to this, it obviously people care. And because they care, that enough alone is a reason to vote no on this, just so that that the public has an opportunity to look at this, because they haven't. And they very much care. I'm going to be in an HOA meeting tomorrow night where we'll talk about this. But you know, and you know, you've heard Mr. Schumacher's comment about this is about Cuckoo Academy. This is not about a general facility. The whole ordinance was initiated because of Cuckoo Academy. It is not about general child care and general facilities and trying to meet code, because those things, I mean, it says that in the executive ordinance, it says that in the whole thing. And it's not about fixing a code oversight as well, because there are opportunities to put nonconforming uses in zones that make sense. There are areas where these things can go. I'm not arguing that there might have to be some minor modifications and tweaks about doing that, but you know, this is about a situation where an applicant found a location in an area where it's not allowed, and they decided to go ahead and try to push this through this kind of a process. And one reason to do it this way is because it eliminates public notification requirements. When it goes through as an ordinance, it doesn't have to, it has to be notified in the paper, but you no longer have to notify adjacent landowners. There's a defined applicant shown in this, and you know, so it's inappropriate for everybody to be you know, doing this as an ordinance, as opposed to go through the process as an applicant, let people have their say in this, and then we can have those kind of conversations. I put together a whole list of questions that that my time's gonna run out here in about 30 seconds. I would like to have those questions addressed so that we can talk about this. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. No one else has signed up, but is there anyone else who would like to come on up? State your name and address, please, and say your piece.
Now I talk loud, so do I need that?
Yeah.
I still need that? Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. My name is Jenny Kudna, 6625 Lakeside Drive. I am a partner with Ken Huey from Kakua, and I'm here to talk about the kids. That's really what this is about to us, is about the kids. I don't normally talk about my own personal life, but what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to tell you a story about a 14-year-old who was in middle school struggling to fit in. Middle school's the worst, with bullying and not knowing who he was, and my child got suspended from school for marijuana. Now, as a mother, you look at yourself and say, what did I do wrong? How could I have done this? What could I have done better? Oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mother. I'm a horrible person. But it happens. I look normal, right? I mean, I look like a normal person out there. Happens to everyone. Doesn't matter. These kids are not kids that, you know, I put my kid volunteers now at the nursing home because he wants to, not because he has to, because he gives back. But guess what? I was the mother who had to put my kid and get some behavioral therapy and to understand what that was and what was going on with him. So that's a personal, so I want you to know that that comes from the heart, because that really happened to me. And then I want to tell you a story about Zoe. Zoe's not her name, but Zoe's real. And Zoe was on her way, sophomore in high school, actually wanted to go to Harvard. Now this is a smart kid, right? Wants to go to Harvard. She has a 4-point GPA, and all of a sudden you see it start to go like this. And guess what? Zoe had been molested by her uncle. And so what Zoe started doing was drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. Not for any other reason. For all the reasons that happened. Not just because, hey, look, I'm a teenager and I want to go drink. Or I want to do drugs. That's not what that was. That was for self-help. So Zoe's actually one of those kids that actually made it. God help. As her parents understood what was going on, she didn't tell her parents that she'd been molested. She thought it was her fault. So she thought it was okay to drink. So as she tells her parents, she starts to get help. She starts to get behavioral therapy. She starts to understand what caused this. These are the type of kids that we're looking at helping. And what happens when we come in to some communities sometimes is people are fearful of kids. Well, these kids are amazing kids who've had some troubles in their lives. And I don't care if they're children or adults. Everyone has problems, and sometimes people need help. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address council?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Peter Schaub. I reside at 5841 Boundary Place in Longmont. I also serve, my firm, law firm serves as counsel for Kakua and Ken Huey. Wanted to touch on a few things. Brian did a good job, I think, of stating much of what I was going to go over. The matter before the council this evening is not a site-specific review application. The city in this zoning change application is the applicant. It was initiated, in a sense, by Ken Huey and Kakua approaching the city and saying, hey, we're interested in locating a facility here. Where would that be appropriate? And it did not fit any of the current zone districts. So to address some of the points that were just made moments ago, we can't submit an application as an applicant for a site-specific review process until there is a change in the zoning code. And that change sounds to be inevitable. We're trying to move forward through the public process. Nothing has been hidden. That's simply not the truth. Again, just to reiterate, this point was maybe made earlier. This particular use, the residential child care facility, is currently not permitted, or it does not fit any particular definition for use in any of the current zoning districts. The fact is that we can't exclude it completely from anywhere in the city, and that is one reason why Ken Huey and his partners approached the city to ask for consideration of a change to the zoning code. And if I may, just for a moment, as a father of two young men, very young men at this point, I understand the concerns that are raised by the public in terms of what does this look like? What is this going to do to our neighborhood? How is this going to impact? That's what the site-specific review process is intended for. That's what the conditional use process will vet out. And if that use and that location are not appropriate, staff has the discretion to either require conditions to be met, or planning and zoning can deny it. But that's not what's happening tonight. We need to consider this. It sounds as though the change is inevitable. We're just asking for it to move forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up, sir. Your name and address?
Hi, my name's Rusty White. I live at 1687 Westward Drive in Lafayette. Just a couple of brief comments, because I'm that broker guy. Just to reiterate what Brian said, in June, we did start, in March is when we started looking for properties. And somewhere between March and June, Dr. Huey decided he wanted Longmont. And so as he was looking for a property to open the business, he also was looking to buy a home, and he did buy a house in Longmont. And one of the buildings that we had identified as potential was in the BLI zoning. And so we approached the staff and worked through them, and initially we believed that it might have been a use by right already, because there's so many uses that might work. Staff ultimately decided no, they wanted to quote unquote run it by council, and so consequently they did this to change the allowed use to add that allowed use. And so consequently, just want to make sure to reiterate what Brian said, that there was a lot of confusion because the state definition doesn't really fit in anywhere in Longmont. And so that's what caused this sort of behind the scenes working, if you will, which weren't behind the scenes at all. And just to reiterate, the concern of public input and notification obviously was addressed by this council at its last meeting, I believe, when it said that it needed to be a conditional use and therefore will require the neighborhood meeting and a public hearing. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to? Fred, come on up. Your name and address for the record.
It's Fred Klepich, and I live in Nelson Park. First off, I'd like to thank Mayor Bagley and the council for the service that you offer here. You couldn't pay me enough to do what you guys are doing. That's even worse. I'm sorry. First, I'd like to agree with Mr. Sanger. I live 2 blocks approximately from where their proposed location is, which Dr. Huey had mentioned in, I think, the last council meeting. My question is, I looked on his website, his Kukua website, and it indicates that he's opening a facility in Colorado in June of 2018. And I'd like to, maybe one of his spokesmen can address how he is advertising his facility before the change of zoning has even been in effect. So, and I am concerned about my own property and the values and what could happen with this facility. And I'm still not clear specifically, you know, he can have, I guess, more than 5 of the substance abuse people on his site. So more than 5, is that like 100? What's the limit to that? I guess my main concern was he's already advertising this as a site that he's going to open. So, I mean, has he talked to anybody else on the council about this? That's kind of a question I would have. Thank you.
Coming up.
My name's Bill Funk. I live in the Willow Creek Estates, and my concern with this is that it's being pushed through very fast without any notification, and I agree with Mr. Singer, because I didn't know about it until it was brought to my attention just over this weekend. If we're changing the zoning, that impacts property values, and as we all know, as I've, at least the information that I've been given, I'll say it that way, is this isn't a Montessori school. This is something that's going to be a national rehabilitation thing where we're going to be bringing in troubled teens from all over the country, which doesn't sound to me like something small like a Montessori where we've got kids playing in the yard. This sounds more like troubled teens that are going to be pushed into our neighborhoods. So I have a real concern with it going forward at this fast pace without any notification to the neighborhoods. I read the newspapers. I look online. I haven't seen anything about it until Mr. Singer brought it to my attention. So I would ask that you vote no on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will close the public invited to be heard. Further discussion from council. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would just like to say to the public that this is a code review. It is not about the applicant at this point. My concern is that we do have child care facilities there, in all areas of the city. We have adult care facilities in all areas of the city. So to specifically get this code changed and it is because the applicant wants to do it, and I don't have a problem with what he is doing as far as caring for addicted, troubled teens. I would always approve of that. But I don't see any point in rushing it through. I think it should go through the normal review process and come up with the other codes. Just like the public, this has come to us, and I specifically don't feel that there's been enough time to review it. I like reviewing the codes to see what exactly is being proposed and where this goes. Does this mean that other facilities that are in other parts of town that are not in BLI zones, are they then no longer allowed in those zones? Are they grandfathered in? I have a lot of questions. So I'm going to move that we defer this and put it through the normal code process, which will come up in a couple of months, I guess, for our review.
Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I agree with Councilwoman Peck. You think that you just got notified of this? We just got this in our packet a couple of weeks ago. And so I do feel like, although this is a code thing, it is for this specific applicant. It's being rushed through, and I'm uncomfortable with that when we don't really. We've asked for more information about this specific applicant. I'm uncomfortable with our code being modified and amended for one specific applicant. I don't think that's very good policy, and that's what it looks like to me is happening here. So I would vote to, as Councilman Peck said, defer it to going through the regular thing. I think we need to think a little bit harder when we're talking about eliminating the hospital overlay or some of these things for rehabilitative facilities, because maybe we shouldn't be eliminating those. I think rehabilitative facilities, whether it's for a nursing home or group rehabilitative homes, which is what this is, where people live long-term. This is going to be 6 months if you look at their website, or more, because that's more effective for substance abuse problems. I think that's a special kind of a use, and we really need to be careful about things. I don't think we should just be deciding this for the purpose of this one applicant. So I would second.
All right, and before, there's 3 people requesting to speak. Is there anyone who has a viewpoint on the other side? Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. This business can't even look for property because we don't have a code that shows where he can go. I don't think that's fair to him either. It's clearly a code revision that needs to be made. We've made it conditional so that it will have to go through a public hearing when it comes up, when he finds and secures that facility or that building. I see no reason to delay it any longer when it is something that needs to be done right now in order for someone, a legitimate business, to look for a piece of property.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. This isn't really, okay, I'm just going to put it this way, I guess. I was on Planning and Zoning Commission for the last 2 years. I'm very, very conversant with our zoning code and the usage rights of our zoning codes and such. So for me, this wasn't too fast because I was already very aware of how a lot of the process works and how all of that stuff works. And I just also want to say, I do disagree strongly with a lot of your assertions, Mr. Singer, but I respect your opinion, and I definitely respect my fellow council members who may not feel as comfortable with the code as I do and the processes of land development as it goes through P&Z and through notification. And so I'm going to respectfully probably vote with the motion to defer it, but I have no interest in failing this motion outright, if that makes sense to you, because I think that's also doing a disservice to maybe not Kakua, but some other, facility that could come to, say, what would be perceived as a more appropriate place or some such thing. So I don't want to close this out from being allowed in our community, period. So I would support a deferment, if you will.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I confess that I am still undecided as how to vote on this because I think several things are still misunderstood by the people of Longmont, and I am very cautious about setting precedents that are going to hamper the city in its ability to grow and develop and change with the times. I do not believe there's been any rushing through. This council saw the amended ordinance for the first time 2 weeks ago, and there had been no discussion, if I'm correct, with anyone on council before that time, even the ones who were on the last council. That was a matter that was being brought forward by the staff, as is proper. So what it seems to me that we have to do is make sure that whether we accommodate this as an exception or whether we defer it to be considered with the larger set of zoning changes, that we don't set any precedent that the city can't react to a new perceived need by introducing a zoning ordinance out of cycle, because things are going to come up that need to be addressed. So I want to make sure that that it's said that the staff has been doing their job and has not done anything improper by bringing this forward ahead of the larger review of zoning. So I just want that all to be clear before we vote. And I'd like about a minute before we vote just to think about it one more time.
Thank you, Councilmember Martin. I guess I want to share my thoughts. I guess I respect everybody's opinion. Some people more than others. Fred, I see every morning working out, so don't hate me. But some of the, and I didn't respond, but I have read your letter, Mr. Singer, and I figured that we'd have plenty of time to discuss this evening, and maybe it sounds like on another occasion as well coming up. But my view on everybody here, and you yourself take into account our personal values, experiences, et cetera, and mine are a little different. Yes, it might be true, and I don't know if the statistic you shared that 60 to 80% of drug abusers will drop out of rehab. But I would agree that as far as adults go, when they try rehab, yeah, it fails. But I also know, working as a juvenile attorney, that I know that when children have the support, therapy, and resources necessary, when they get into trouble and are using drugs or committing crime, recidivism is virtually 0% when they have the treatment and support they need. And so I remember, I hope I don't embarrass him, but my brother Michael, love him to death. I'm the oldest of 5. My brother Michael, when he was 14, not due to substance abuse, I don't know why, I was young at the time, but he had to be removed and was looking at foster care. And he went into a neighbor's home and received the therapy and the help. And I remember thinking, God, what would have happened if he wouldn't have stepped up? My brother would have had no place to go except to the foster system, right? And he got the therapy, he got the support, he got the love, he got the foundation, graduated #1 in his class at UNC, now is State Farm's, I think, literally one of their, if not the most successful agent that runs a book of business. I mean, it just worked. Me and my wife, as a result of that and other experiences, the reason why we chose to be foster parents and adopt was because these type of facilities don't exist. There are homeless youth, and there are children all over, not just Longmont, but the United States, that they don't have the facilities and the professional resources to actually get help. And as far as I understand, and unfortunately, I mean, I disagree with your legal analysis on the constitutionality of the statute, but what is unconstitutional is saying that, hey, if you live in Wyoming or Alaska, you can't move to Colorado or you can't move to Longmont. We can travel and live wherever we want, and there are children in need everywhere. And whether it's tonight or coming up, just giving you a heads up, my heart and my brain as I read this, I think that this would be of benefit to our community and to our children and to other cities and municipalities' children. And I think that when you see that there's resources put into helping children, unlike adults, are malleable and bounce back and do good things when given a chance. And so the motion is to postpone it, correct? I really think that I don't have a problem with the zoning change. I'm kind of like Councilmember Rodriguez, but I'd go one step further. I'm kind of with Councilmember Finley, thinking that we should go ahead and approve it, and then if we wanted to have a battle later on over, I mean, this isn't going to happen tonight. This isn't a specific use being approved tonight. It's just laying the foundation and the groundwork for having the debate when they apply for a permit and a use to have that discussion. And whether it's now or whether we wait till the spring when we do our land code, I'm just kind of letting everybody know that I think that this is something that we should approve. And whether the battle happen now in January or whether it happen in June, the battle's still going to happen, it sounds like. But anyway, that's where I stand. Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I see what Councilman Rodriguez is saying, and I agree with that. But I just think that it would be good to have a much broader discussion before we amend the code tonight and amend it for a specific case. I would really like to have a more nuanced discussion about how we're thinking of rehabilitation facilities. And that seems to me how this should be cast, as a rehabilitation facility, which, and so I don't want to pass something just for one business. I want us to spend a little more time thinking about the future. That's why I delay it.
All right. Well, with that, why don't we go ahead and take a vote, see where we're at. And the motion, repeating the motion, it's to essentially table, your motion was to essentially table this issue until we have table this issue to when we are bringing back the land use development code. Correct? Okay. So it's a yes vote means wait and let's bring it back. Negative means no, do something else. It passes 4-2 with Bonnie Finley and myself dissenting. So you have your direction. All right, with that, let's move on to the next. Ordinance 2017-79, a bill for an ordinance amending section 14.04160 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding water system development fees for small lot affordable dwellings. Are there any questions from council to begin with, of staff? Seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Would anyone like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And can I have a motion, please? Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I move passage of Ordinance O 2017-79.
Councilmember Peck, do you have a... No? Okay. Then let's go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously. Let's go ahead and move on to second reading for parking code enforcements. Ordinance 2017-81, a bill for an ordinance amending sections 11.04.114 and 11.04.119 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding angled parking and parking in alleys. Are there any questions from council or staff? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the public. Seeing that no one would like to speak, let's close the public hearing. Can we have a motion, please? Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I move that we pass.
Do you want to hit that mic?
I move that we passed ordinance 2017-81.
If there's no further debate, let's vote. And Councilmember Peck. you're getting called on for the next one. Missed the last two. And that passes unanimously. Let's move on to the second reading of ordinance 2017-82, a bill for an ordinance amending section 11.16.040 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding method and location of fine payment for parking infractions. Are there any questions of council? Seeing none, Councilmember Peck? Well, let's public hearing first, though. Councilmember Peck? Oh, thank you. Councilmember Peck?
Thank you. I move passage of ordinance 2017-82.
Let's have a public hearing, and then let's make that real quick. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? I feel like an auctioneer. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Peck.
I move passage of ordinance 2017-82.
And that was seconded jointly by Councilmember Finley and Councilmember Martin. Let's vote if there's no discussion. And that passes unanimously. We doing okay? Do you want to actually, let's go ahead and take a short break because there's no items that we removed from the consent agenda, and this general business might take a little bit. So let's take a 5-minute break. What? All right, let's go ahead and get going. This time, let's do general business. We'll turn the time over to Karen Roney for her presentation of 2018's Human Service Agency funding recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. We are general business. So my name is Karen Roney. I am the Community Services Director here for the City of Longmont. To my left is Carmen Sample. She is the chair this year of our Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. And way in the back, we have two of our members, Charles Cerns and David Spencer, and they're just hanging out in the back, cheering us on. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because it sounds like there's lots of coughing, and you'd love for us to move through this quickly. So we will do that and be.
To be clear, Ms. Roney, even if there was no coughing, I always appreciate you moving through this quickly. But if you want me to cough more, I will. If that's the key,
if
people,
that would be a
I become the coughing mayor instantly.
So here we go. So as many of you on council do know, and our newest members are learning, is that in our city financial policies, we allocate, right now it's 2.05% of general fund revenues for support of human service agencies that provide needed services to members of the Longmont community. In 2018, that total amount was $1.261674 million. So we did have an increase in the total amount that was available to allocate in 2018. The other thing that happened is that we, before I go forward, I should look at my notes. And the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board is the advisory board that council appoints that is responsible for coordinating this effort and bringing back recommendations to City Council for Council's final decision. So tonight we are here to present those 2018 Human Service Agency funding recommendations. We changed things up significantly going into 2018. As council is aware, is that we did conduct two significant needs assessments in 2016 and finished those up in 2017 in two areas. One, we conducted an assessment to really look at how our community serves adults experiencing homelessness. We felt like we were investing significant amounts of resources into those services and weren't really sure that we were getting the maximum effort and outcome that we desired to have out of that investment. So we looked at what could we do differently as a system in helping adults who are struggling with homelessness. The second assessment that we conducted was, and we do this every 3 or 4 years, just an overall assessment of what do low and moderate income residents in our community, what are they experiencing these days, so that we can make sure that when we come to you and we make recommendations about how to invest those dollars, that we are doing so in as informed way as possible based on what are the current trends, what are the significant shifts in needs, what are some major holes, if there are, in any of the safety net services, so that when we consider applications and we bring forward recommendations, we're trying to do that in a way that meets the current challenges for low and moderate income residents in our community. So what that led to, and we brought this to City Council back in the summer, I think it was in July of this year, was a recommendation to change things up pretty significantly, which was twofold. One, to take half of that $1.2 million and allocate that toward two significant issues. One was addressing our system of serving adults experiencing homelessness and being part of a whole coordinated entry and navigation and housing focused shelter system in Boulder County. And second, to really try to address the need of the ongoing affordable housing need. And specifically in the assessment, what we heard from a pretty significant number of residents in our community is that they are currently in housing, but they might be a crisis, an unexpected bill, an unexpected medical procedure, if you will, away from really being at risk of losing their housing and not being able to afford the housing that they are in. So our recommendation to council at that point in time was let's set aside about $630,000, which is half of that amount, and invest those differently than through this Human Service Agency grant process. So that left $630,000 to allocate through this application process, which we will be talking about right now. What we when we looked at, and this is just a high-level summary, when we looked at the results of the needs assessment, some of the most prevalent issues in our community had to do with housing. We heard that a lot. Jobs not keeping pace with expenses and what it costs to live here anymore, and food insecurity. Some of the greatest needs, most prevalent needs, and also some gaps really had to do with access to health care and housing, again. I made that list. We also, the consultants that we worked with also identified some of our most vulnerable populations in Longmont that seem to struggle in many of these areas. We've listed those here, as well as even though there was a pretty high gap, there was a lower need for people needing legal assistance and learning English. So the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board looked at all of those areas and basically came up with the this funding framework as we moved into assessing the applications that we received for funding in 2018. The one thing that we really wanted to do is to make sure that we linked our recommendations with the needs assessments. You know, we have a lot of data, and we wanted to really remain true to that data and consider that as we made our funding recommendations and base that on as much data as we could. We wanted to continue to support a full range of services that make up Longmont's safety net. And we also aligned the services or the areas that we funded with what is really happening throughout the county that is really trying to focus on those social determinants of health, those social and economic factors that really make a difference and impact people's lives in basically in these areas, which has to do again with housing stability, self-sufficiency and resilience, food and nutrition, health and well-being, education and skill building, and the whole area of safety and justice. Those are often considered social determinants of health that, as we're looking at making sure that families, and particularly lower income families in our community, can be stable and thrive, those are the dimensions that we try to look at and make sure that households have a good balance of access to all of those particular services. We also looked at making sure that we targeted the greatest portion of our funding on the areas that had the highest impact in our community. Sorry. You know, that was informed by our needs assessment. That we also looked at the, you know, where we had the greatest gaps, so the greatest severity of issues in our community, while we wanted to focus funding on that. And we also had discussions about the degree to which the Longmont's funding could really make an impact on that particular issue. So when we entered this process in the fall, we recommended that 60% of the money that we had available to allocate, that we would allocate to the 3 areas of housing stability, food and nutrition, and access to health and other services that promote well-being, and those lined up with the needs assessment. And then 40% of the available funding would go to the areas that were a little bit lower, which you can see listed there on the slide. So we received applications from 39 agencies proposing to fund 46 different programs. The amount of requests we received was $1.3 million, and we had $630,000 and some change to allocate. So it was a real challenge for the advisory board to think, how are we going to figure this out? And it was it was very thoughtful. We came up with a variety of different options and scenarios, really based on data to try to figure out how to allocate less, half as much money as what was being requested by the agencies that came forward. So how we ended up doing that is that we went through, the advisory board reads every application. They hold public hearings with the agencies and score each of the applications. There is criteria that we use that is weighted, that looks at all of the dimensions of the agency operations. And this year we also added criteria that added points for how did the agency meet the needs that came forward in the needs assessment. How did they serve some of the vulnerable populations that were identified? And we came up with a scoring scheme for each agency in each program. So then we had to figure out what to do next. And our baseline assumption as we have in the slide is that we did go ahead and consider funding new agencies, and I believe we funded 2 new agencies. We also entered with an assumption that no agency, if they were funded in 2017, would get more than they had in 2017, because we knew we had a small amount to distribute, and that we basically assigned percentages based on the level, the scores or the points that agencies accumulated based on the assessment of the advisory board. And we also had to establish some cutoffs, that agencies that scored less than X number of points would not be considered for funding, because we had to make some judgments about how we were going to take 1.3 and get to 630,000. So ultimately, what you have before you this evening is a slate of recommendations for 28 agencies and 29 programs for funding. And I'm just going to go right to that. So, and again, we had roughly 678,000 and some change that supported housing stability, food and nutrition, health and well-being, and these are the agencies that we are recommending for funding. I will move through these quickly, and we would be glad to answer any questions after the presentation. So none of these agencies got, they all received less money than they received in 2017, every one of them. And then we had a few agencies that received money in 2017, but not in 2018. And it basically was where the cutoff fell in order for us to bring a balanced set of recommendations to the City Council. So Growing Gardens also received money last year, and they fell below the cutoff for funding in 2018. In the kind of the second tier of agencies, here is here is how we had recommended funding in this arena. The Children First of the Rockies was a recipient in 2017. They fell below the cutoff, and we did not recommend funding for them in 2018. In this area of self-sufficiency and resilience, the Agency Association for Community Living was a past recipient of dollars and did not receive funding in 2017. And in this area with education skill development, Boulder County Public Health with their Genesister program and El Comité did not receive funding, and they have received funding in the past. So I'll just wrap up here, and then we'll really open that up to questions that you might have, because I imagine you might have some questions. So, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board took their job very seriously. It's very difficult to make recommendations. So one of the things that they could have done is said, we're just going to take an easy way out. We'll just slice every agency by X number. But that really wasn't that didn't align with what the assessment said, and so they decided to make some hard choices. And it's City of Longmont funding is not a reflection on an agency's value or the services they provide in the community, but we felt that with the assessment and the needs, that those public dollars should go to address those things that seem to be most critical in the needs assessment that we completed. We also talked about, and I think we will continue to work on this, probably starting at our next meeting, is looking forward to 2019, and how do we reset funding amount. So in the past, funding has really kind of been predicated on what agencies received in prior years, and it might be a good time for us to do a complete reset of that process if we continue to allocate money in the way that we allocated it in 2018. And I think the final bullet point here is that, if we are really wanting to move the needle and move the mark on some of these really challenging issues, such as people experiencing homelessness, and making sure that there is attainable and stable housing for all, those are pretty significant investments. And to move dollars from a safety net that also is important to support people in our community it will bring us back here again with kind of the same conversation. So I would imagine, and I imagine we'll be hearing from the agencies and be working with them on, it's been quite a while since we asked for an increase in the percentage of how much general fund revenues are set aside for to support people who are in need in our community. It might be time to revisit that. We certainly will be starting those conversations, I imagine Thursday, to really take a look at that. Because I think the other thing we will be monitoring, because we did set aside $600,000 for housing stabilization, which is a new initiative, and as well as to fund the coordinated system for working with adults experiencing homeless throughout Boulder County. So we'll have some experience under our belts in terms of what those investments have really have done, what kind of impact are they making. Should we be doing more of that in 2019? Should we go to plan B or C? We don't know, but our goal and our commitment is to follow those initiatives carefully to see if a greater investment in those significant needs are really making a difference in moving the needle for people struggling in Longmont in those areas. So again, I just want to thank the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board members, Carmen, Charles, and David, and our other members who worked really hard this year. I don't know if when they signed up to become, I shouldn't do this because we're appointing members next meeting, but it's a lot of work. They signed up to do a lot of work this last term, and so they were very thoughtful and really tried to be data driven in these recommendations, knowing that it was going to be very difficult. We continued to be to have conversations with agencies along the way. I think that they knew that a reduction was coming, but there's one thing when you know it, and there's one thing when you experience it. And the advisory board members did not take that lightly. And I have no more comments, Mayor, and I don't know if Carmen has any, or we'll just really open it up to questions that the council might have.
Okay, I've got a Councilmember Finley. I'll let you go.
That way you can save your voice.
Thank you, yes.
I want to thank you for directing this whole process. I love the way that you've used metrics to do it. It makes it a hard job just a little less hard when you have measurements. It's a hard thing to do, but I appreciate that you've done it. And I'm sure that we will look at increasing some funding maybe next year so that you'll have a little more to do. But I would move that we approve your funding recommendations for 2018.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a question about El Comité. You did not give them any funding, so my question is, who else is giving citizenship classes? Because I know they do that. Is there any other group on here like Intercambio or Our Center? Is anyone doing citizenship classes?
Councilmember Peck, oh, I'm very sorry, didn't mean to blast you. Mayor and Councilmember Peck. So so really it is El Comité that is it is providing some of the basically citizenship classes. They did not apply for that service through the Human Service Agency funds this year. They applied for their education program, basically their English, their ESL classes. And you know, it was a struggle. They were having a hard time continuing those classes because they had lost state funding for that.
Pretty important.
And so they were kind of in kind of limbo land. But they did apply actually for ESL classes and not for their other array of services. What I do understand is that they, and I need to confirm that with Donna, is I do understand that they did receive a $50,000 grant recently to continue to provide their ESL classes, and so and that would be for 2018. And El Comité can certainly absolutely come back into the mix. It just was not a strong application this year with the status of their education funding, and just as council members may or may not know, is that the building in which El Comité operates is owned by the city of Longmont, and so we are still supporting El Comité by free rent, and we pay utilities, and so they still will have our support for operating at as low cost as possible.
Okay, is the Our Center doing ESL as well?
They are not. So I think they. Okay, you look like maybe you know more. So that is not one of their. That is not one of the. I mean, I think they support education, but I think Intercambio does some ESL training, but it's not the formal curriculum like El Comité is doing.
Oh, because I thought Kat went over from El Comité to Our Center specifically for ESL.
So they might provide some language support as part of their new Family Resource Center program, but it would not be in the same category as what El Comité is providing with the different levels of language acquisition.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I guess I had some thoughts rather than a question, and my question is, why'd you do it that way? No, that's my overall question. How much did we give to Safe Shelter last year? Or how much was the contract that we contracted services for last year? Do you know?
Yeah, I do.
All right, cool.
I just have to find it.
It just seemed like a big number.
So, Mayor and council members, so Safe Shelter of St. Vrain Valley, I believe their contract last year was $100,000. So Safe Shelter is a large recipient. Mental Health Partners is a large recipient of dollars, as well as the Our Center. Those are the agencies that receive the some of the highest amounts of dollars from.
It was $100,000 last year.
I guess first of all, I was on this committee for I think 4 years, and I love what you guys do. I appreciate your work, Ms. Sample. Thank you. I guess my concern is a lot of these things that I'm seeing. Like, for example, my question would be, I understand if housing stability is one of our highest priorities, why we'd want to, let's give it to Safe Shelter. But I work with them quite a bit. I think they should get funded, don't get me wrong. But typically what happens is if you're in a domestic violence situation, you're going to go to Safe Shelter, and I would argue that it's really not a housing stability organization, because what happens is you get referred to an attorney that he gets hit with a restraining order, or you hit your abusing spouse with a restraining order. They're the ones that have a housing stability problem, not not the women and even the men seeking help at safe shelter. And so it might be housing stability, but we're giving the money, I think, to people who tend to beat their wives and their kids. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, what I'm saying is if you're placing it in the housing stability category, or the same thing with Blue Sky Bridge, I mean, the question is, why are we giving $6,900 to them? Why is it so low? Because that's the facility that if there's a child that comes forward and says, look, I have been molested, they're the first line of defense. They take in the child, they get the child to disclose in a comfortable environment. And a lot of times it's a child who's offending on another sibling in the home. And all of a sudden you've got parents that are just struggling with one household, and the county comes and says, your child can't be around his sibling or her sibling. And all of a sudden now you've got a family that's ripped apart. And that's housing stability, because they can't afford two homes, but they still have to be parents to these two children. And so I guess the question I have overall as I'm sitting here talking is, how did you place each of these organizations into the appropriate and or relevant category? Was there discussion on that?
Mayor and council members, so as I went back and we kind of looked at, we defined each of those areas of self-sufficiency, social determinants of health. So what we did is we did our best to align those agencies and what their purpose is with the definitions of those social determinants of health. It is some science, it is some art, and I think your point is well taken about the amounts, and I think we did talk about that as an advisory board, and that's when I mentioned that we think going into 2019 it's time to reset, so that because how we approached this in 2018 was really looking at historical investment, and we did consider resetting in 2018, and we were looking at really significantly reducing most all of the agencies in that kind of scenario. And we just felt that was too abrupt in year one to do that. But I think we are, I would say that the advisory board probably agrees with you, Councilmember Bagley, that it is time to reset those amounts, because the historical spending is not going to continue to make a lot of sense. We need to reset that.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Can I put this on?
Ms. Sam?
Oh, there we go. Okay. But to address the piece about the residential program, the Safe Shelter is a residential program, so I want to make sure that was really clear. They're a primary service program. So whereas Blue Sky Bridge is more of a support service program, in though it provides really great services, of course, but when you're allocating funding, it's hard because every agency that's applying provides something amazing, so it's that conversation of like, do you choose the kids or the elderly or and so that's an impossible conversation to have. So that's why we really try to focus it on the data metrics, and then we also really made sure that anybody that was providing a primary residential program, which is really expensive to run, it was in the housing category, if that makes sense. Blue Sky Bridge is not residential, whereas Safe Shelter is providing overnight staff, and that's a more expensive program, which is why they're in housing stability.
That addresses my concern quite well. And then the only other question I have is, I guess, I love the farmers market, I understand. But why are we it hurts me a little bit to say we're going to give $3,000 to the farmers market, but we're not giving anything to El Comité. Yeah. And even though they only applied for the ESL program, I understand that organization, like them or love them, 26% of our residents are Latino. Mm-hmm. A large number of those are immigrants and first-generation immigrants, and that's who they turn to when they need help with finding jobs, learning English, which is self-sufficiency and resilience, or housing stability. So I would like to see us have some type of contracted service with El Comité. That is my only, and if we have to take it out of the farmers market and some out of Safe Shelter, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I really think that we need to support El Comité.
I have two responses to that. So two things. So
you're not called on, Ms. Sample. I'm just kidding.
So we did talk about the farmers market pretty extensively because we as well kind of had this moment of like, well, they hit the cutoff mark, and so we fund them over these other agencies. And we had a whole discussion that was kind of a roundabout discussion, and we ended up, again, defaulting to the metrics. We were like, at the end of the day, their scores were higher with all the other data points that were received versus El Comité. So that's one point. We tried really hard to stay true to the metrics, even though we might have had kind of personal opinions. We're like, ah. So in that discussion, it was kind of a conversation of like, do we need to adjust metrics for next year in part? But it is what it is this year, and we stayed true to that. The other piece of that, I just lost my train of thought. Shoot. If I think about it, I'll come back.
It was a good So how much did El Comité request?
Oh, I remember.
Oh, yes,
Sorry.
Ms. Apple.
The one thing is that we have to remember, too, that we are not just funding the agencies. We're funding programs within the agencies. So I think people forget that, too, where they see the actual agency and they think that we're just restricting funding from them as a whole, but to remember that we're only funding a specific program that they are requesting within the agency. So that sometimes can be confusing because when you see the name of the company, it can be kind of deceiving as to what they're actually requesting funding for.
So in other words, even if we gave them money, they requested money for ESL.
They may have requested money for something that wasn't a priority based on the community needs assessment.
Right, but
does that make sense? Even though they're a great organization, they're only requesting money for a certain thing they're providing.
But I assume they could then use that money for ESL and then use that money that they would have used for something else. Technically. That's what I was assuming.
We contract with them to provide the service, right?
Understand.
So in 2018, they received $18,000. 2017, sorry.
What did they ask for this year?
40.
40,000.
Yeah, and most of the agencies did ask for significantly higher money. So again, 1.3 million. We had 630 to distribute.
And we do agree that some of the agencies with the high amounts, like 100,000, we all had that discussion pretty thoroughly this year of sometimes agencies are more savvy than others and how much money they request. They may have better grant writers. They may just kind of be more savvy in the system. And so historically, those numbers have kind of risen, sometimes unjustified or sometimes unnecessarily. So that's what Karen is talking about of next year. We kind of need to reset the platform and say, here are our guidelines and here's how much we'll fund in each tier versus what their grant writer thinks they should request, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Christensen?
I wanted to add a comment on two things. The Boulder County Farmers Market, that grant is for harvest bucks, I believe, and that is a matching program. So if we give, and it's only a matching program, so if we give $3,000, the county matches that, and then that's $6,000 available to people who want fresh food. And the idea that tomatoes down there cost $6 is absurd. It is. You can get, food from the farmers. The Safe Shelter, I believe, is the only place in Longmont that provides housing for children. Is that correct? That's what I was told. Okay, so
I mean, there's a lot of family,
right?
Well,
Yeah.
for
So,
emergencies for children,
right? So I think in terms
it
of
isn't just
sorry.
Yeah, it is residential, and it isn't just for people who are abused. It's for anybody who has children, as well as single people, but who has an emergency.
But
right.
more than
and I think to clarify, it really is domestic violence, related.
Yeah.
So I think in the area of housing and the application process, we really focused on, it really was emergency and transitional housing. And so the providers that we funded are the ones that provide that. And certainly, Safe Shelter has a particular niche, which is for domestic violence victims.
But domestic violence in Longmont is one of the leading causes of homelessness. So it's very, very sad. And we need to try to do something about that. But that's why it really is I don't think it's more money than they need. So.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Backley. I just want to make another plug. The one thing that El Comité does, and I think they do it very well, is to mediate rental prices with property owners and residents when they start raising their rents and actually move people out who can't afford the rate increases. And they have a a good mediation program. So when you're thinking about housing, I think we should think about keeping people in their homes as well, rather than just finding new housing or transitional housing. So I know that they didn't request that, but I would like you to keep that in mind, that that's a real important piece.
So that's a great segue, and I don't want to take us down a different path, but but we will bring information back, because I had mentioned that we had set aside, we have actually set aside $300,000 for basically housing stabilization, for exactly what you have talked about. So we created an RFP, a request for proposal. We released that. We received responses back. We are going to be reviewing those on Thursday with our intent of how do we keep people who are housed in their housing. So it's a whole initiative. When we looked at the data that came out of the needs assessment, that there were so many households that were an unexpected expense away from really struggling. So that is a new initiative that we are rolling out to do that very thing, because we want to keep people in their housing, and how can we catch people early while they are struggling and see what we can assist with.
I'm going to actually move that we allocate $15,000 to El Comité and then proportionally take it out of all the others. Any further discussion on that?
So, Mayor?
Uh-huh.
Because the other thing that we certainly could look at, if council wanted us to, that we could explore, do we have other ways to fund El Comité, that $15,000, without taking away from the current agency? So we could explore how to make that happen.
Then I'll
so
change my
if
motion.
You wanna,
I'll change my motion.
If you want that.
I'll change my motion to say I move that we direct staff to find $15,000 to help fund El Comité. Okay. Any further discussion? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen. I was like, what are you doing? Got it.
We have done this once before with the women's shelter, with the women's clinic, and I would suggest that we take that out of the contingency fund. We can do that. So I would move that we take the money out of our contingency fund.
Well, we got to vote on this first, but I guess my only thought is that we can do that if I'd like to see if Karen, I don't know, I can't read her mind, but maybe she has a purse in her office for $15,000. I don't know, but I'd like to hear what solution she has. Do you know something right off the top of your head?
Like I said, if council would like us to do that, we can explore how to come up with that $15K in addition, and including from council contingency, and we could bring that back to council, maybe even next
Shortly.
week, right?
All right, great.
So
So
that just gives you some options if you want.
Let's go ahead and vote on the motion then. It's to direct staff to find $15,000 for El Comité. That passes unanimously. So, do we want to? Do we have a motion? We had a motion that wasn't seconded. I'm going to go ahead and second Bonnie Finley's previous motion to go ahead and adopt the what do we call this? Housing and Human Services nonprofit contract fund. Stuff.
The 2018 Human Service Agency funding recommendations.
Yes, the Human Service Agency funding recommendations. So I will second that. No further discussion. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen Roney. All right, now it's time for last. And by the way, I am very impressed, Ms. Samples, because she just went up a couple levels in my book. She can hang with you and Kathy. And she doesn't get paid. She's a volunteer, Karen. You better be careful. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and move on to final call. Public invited to be heard. No one wants to come to say anything. Let's move on to mayor and council comments. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I don't know if she's at home watching on TV, but happy birthday, Mom. I love you.
Aw. Cow. He's just warming the hearts of Longmont, man. First with the glasses, then with his mom. Sheesh, you're killing us. All right. Anyone else have any comments? All right. Seeing none. Harold.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Eugene, don't disappoint me.
No comments, Mayor.
All right. With that, we're adjourned.